Hey, welcome back to the channel. In this tutorial, we're going to create a cyberpunk themed logo intro with the help of some really useful presets by AE Juice, the sponsor of today's video. This tutorial will focus on the Cyberpunk collection, but we'll also have a look at a free font previewer, which is a convenient way of choosing the right fonts for your project. If you'd like to follow along with the tutorial, head on over to aejuice.com and pick up a copy of the Cyberpunk HUD collection for 50% off during their Black Friday sale. Right now, most of their collections are 50% off, but the best bang for your buck is the I Want It All bundle. Let's have a look at what it has to offer. This bundle provides a robust collection of presets for After Effects, including kinetic text animations, slide transitions, animated fonts, callouts, emojis, whiteboard drawings, animated shapes, and many other motion elements. They even have a large selection of sound effects too. Another really useful pack is the Epic Trailers collection, and in addition to After Effects, these presets and templates are available for several popular video editing softwares including Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut, Avid, and Sony Vegas. Alright, let's get back to the tutorial. AE Juice is a really cool set of presets and elements for After Effects. And where its power really begins to shine is not just your ability to go in and change a few things or edit some presets, but it's the ability to go through layer by layer, reverse engineer things if you want to. You can extract certain elements to use elsewhere. You can replace certain layers with your own layers, and it's all very easy to do. And since most of the layers are also vector based, you can scale things up pretty easily without losing quality. So what I want to show in this tutorial is how you can take some of the presets, add some elements to it, and come up with something just a little bit more original. Right, so once you have AE Juice installed, you'll go up to Window and then click on the AE Juice Pack Manager. So right away in the Pack Manager, you get to see all the different packs that you've purchased. And I have the I Want It All bundle, which pretty much includes everything that AE Juice has to offer. And what we're going to be looking at today is the Cyberpunk HUD, which is a collection of pretty cool presets for backgrounds and text logos as well. So the manager presents you with all the different presets, and it shows you a looped animation of each one, which is a nice feature as well. So we've got some backgrounds here, horizontal and vertical, and then we also have these logos that we can use as a starting point. We also have some sound effects, and then we also have these distortion mats, which you could either use for like some kind of displacement, or you could use for more of a Luma mat type of effect, which I think we'll actually use both in this tutorial. Let's go back up to these text animations, and I'm going to click on text animation 7. So we're just going to double click that, wait for that to load in. I'm going to move this window up to a different monitor up here, and then let's go forward maybe just 30 frames or so, and then just preview what we've got. So this is a pretty cool animation. There's a lot of intricate detail in this. We got some text flying down with some distortion and some kind of glowing edges and things like that. I think this is pretty cool, but I think there's quite a few things that we could do just to spice it up a little bit. But before we do that, we need to make sure our comp is set up how we want it. So if we click on this little button here, let's just review some of the settings. So with AE Juice, you can't really increase the bit depth from 16 without having to go through and recolor correct everything, because there are some glows that are being used and some other type of color controls. Introducing a floating point is going to throw off those values. So you can do it, but you're just going to have to go through and redo all the color correction. And for something like a motion graphics logo, anything above 16 bits per channel is kind of overkill anyway. I almost always use 32-bit if I'm starting from scratch. It does give you a little bit more control, especially when it comes to gradients and glows, but for this, it's really not that important. We don't really need to set up a working space for linearization because we're not linearizing it. There's no raw or linear files that we need. So everything here looks good. So let's click OK. And the next thing is the composition setting. So I'm going to do Control K to bring up that. And I want to use 4K. So I'm going to have to manually make some adjustments here. So we'll double the resolution. Frame rate's fine. 24 is fine for this. And then we'll click OK. So now what we have to do is go inside this text animation composition. And then we're going to have to start resizing some of these layers too. So on this composition here, we're going to do Control K, and this is actually fairly small. So you could make this as large as you want. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to quadruple this resolution. Wait for that to load. And then what we can do, go into our control setting right here. And then we have a text size control. And then all we have to do is do 4 times that value too. And then we'll have something that builds up the composition a little bit better. Something like that. So if we click the shy button up here to unshy all the layers, you can see we also have a distortion layer. So if I double click this, we have something that's being used for displacement. This is also a lower resolution, so I am going to increase the resolution of this to 4K as well. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this layer. So Control Shift Y is how we bring that control up, or we can go to layer and then solid settings. And then we're going to increase that to 4K as well. Let's go back to the text animation comp. On this glow layer, I'm going to click S, and then we can double this. We don't really need it to go further than that, that's fine. Really, this composition really only needs to be as large as the text, so we have a little bit of extra space if we wanted to move this around. All right, so let's go all the way to the end here while everything's rested, and then let's go and change the text. We're going to click on this text pre-comp here. Now you can see we've made the text so large that it's going off the screen, so we're going to do the same thing on this composition. Just change that to 4K just so we have some more space. It's not actually changing any of the sub layers, it's just changing kind of our frame where we're viewing it. And we're going to double the resolution for that as well. All right, so let's go ahead and change this text. So we're gonna double click this layer. Same thing, just wanna increase this to 4K just so we have some more area. And you can see it's not actually changing the size of the text. The text is always the same because it's controlled with these expressions. All right, so next what we're gonna do is just grab our text tool and then we can type in a replacement. And then for the subtitle here, we'll just replace that with subscribe. So I wanna show you another cool AE Juice plugin here. And this one is actually free. It's called the Font Previewer. Let's open that up. And this is really, really useful. So if I type in something like CG Stirk, for example, and then I could increase the font size here, just what shows up a little bit better. Move this over. We can just cycle through all of the fonts that you have installed on your computer, and you can see them very clearly. To do the same thing in After Effects, you'd have to like select the text and then scroll down with your font listing. This is a little bit more intuitive and you get a nicer preview of your options. So I'm gonna do Arena, this one. So this is a font that I downloaded. So you need to make sure you're selecting the correct text layer. So this is gonna be text 1, and then all you have to do is double click and that automatically applies there. Next, we can do the second one for subscribe. And then we could find a font that complements this one. So we could do something like this. Double click, and that's pretty good. All right, so we can close that. So next what I wanna do is kind of recenter this. I don't want the subtitle to be left aligned. But before we do that, we're gonna select these layers and detach them from their null object controller. So then we have the ability to move them around. It's not gonna interfere with anything. So on text 1, I'm gonna do Control Alt Home to center our pivot point, and then Control Home. We're gonna do the same thing on the subtitle. So Control Alt Home, and then Control Home. And then we'll just Shift arrow key this down, and then we'll also scale this up a little bit, something like that. And we can select both of these layers and then just pull them up a little bit here. This scale text thing, I'm just gonna turn that off so we get rid of that box. There's also a line here caused by this gradient. So on the scale, just make sure you double that too. So now I'm pretty pleased with that. We're gonna select all 3 of these layers here and then reattach them to the scale text controller. So if I go back to the text animation 7, go to controls, I now still can control the text size here without having to go several subcomps in to make that adjustment. All right, so let's go back to our main comp. I'm also gonna change the resolution here to half just so this is a little bit faster. All right, so that looks pretty cool, but I think we can make it look a little bit more interesting. All right, so let's right click over here, new, and then we'll do null object. And we'll rename this to be zoom. So at the very beginning, I want this to be kind of zoomed up really close to the camera. So I'm gonna take text animation 7, attach that to zoom, and then on zoom, we can click P for position, and we're gonna make this a 3D layer, like click the 3D switch, and then keyframe position. So when you add the 3D button, you also get orientation as well. So that's kind of like the rotation. So I will also animate the orientation, go to the very beginning here, and then we'll do something like -8,000. So it goes really, really close to the camera. And one thing you'll notice, if you try to scrub through this, you won't see the text actually change. So one thing to keep note of here is a lot of the layers in AE Juice actually have collapsed transforms. So for something like this, if you want to be able to control the transform with a null object, for example, you do need to disable the collapse transform button there. And you also need to enable the 3D switch so it can use the Z axis. So now it's getting closer to the camera like this, and that's kind of what I was going for there. Now, at the very beginning, we could also introduce some rotation. So make sure that channel is keyframed, and we could add 20 degrees to it, then it comes in at an angle, something like that. And maybe 8,000 is a little excessive. Maybe we'll just half that and do 4,000. So next we're gonna take this layer, add some motion blur to it, and then let's see what we have. All right, I think that looks a little bit more interesting, but I think we can still make this a little bit more interesting. let's go back to our pack manager and then we'll pull this down here. One thing to keep in mind is don't leave the pack manager open because sometimes it can kind of freeze up and then it makes After Effects freeze until you close the window. So don't freak out, just close the window and then restart it if you encounter that. But what we could do now is find one of these backgrounds. So we'll just do background 11. We're going to double click that, make sure that loads. So when you are loading in elements and presets from the pack manager, make sure it finishes loading before you close, otherwise it can crash After Effects because you're closing the plugin essentially as it's loading and then it freaks out. All right, so next I'm just going to close this window, take this background, let's move it underneath everything. And once again, we're going to double click this layer and we're just going to scale this up. So I'm just going to go through some of these, increase this to 4K, unshy this, and you can see there's quite a few layers here that we have. And really the only thing I care about here is this kind of cool distortion stuff going on. So I don't really care for the text and I don't really need the frame. So all I need are these two things. And the background, we could leave the background, that's okay. But really, this is the most important part that we need. So let's go ahead and then double click this layer and we'll go in, we'll make this also 4K, and then we'll double the size of this layer as well to 4K. And then we'll back out. You can see this is now full size. On the glow, to click your scale and then we could just double that. Same thing for the tritone. All right, something like that is what we need. So on the controls here, we could change the color. For the midtones, we're gonna do something that matches a little bit closer to the text, something like that. And then for the highlights here, we could do something like that and then click OK. We don't really need text color. There's no text anymore. All right, so let's go back to our main composition. Then I also wanna attach this to zoom. So we're gonna uncheck the collapse transforms. We're going to make it 3D. And then we're also going to attach it to that null object. We're just going to follow the text as it comes in. But what I want to have is as that text kind of hits the ground or it comes to a rest right here, I want these little particles to spread out from the text. And the way we're going to do that is with a matte. So let's go back to the pack manager and then we're going to scroll down and we're going to use one of these mattes here. So the one that I like and I think would work the best for this is this displacement map 5. So let's double click that and then I'm going to close this. And because this is just a matte, I'm just going to scale this up. It doesn't really matter that we're losing a little bit of quality, but we don't need this to be super sharp, so it doesn't really matter for this. If I solo this layer and then scrub along, what we need is this area where it gets really bright. That needs to be around frame 15 or 18, somewhere in that range. But it's a little bit slow, so we're going to speed this up. And we're going to speed that up with a time warp effect. So for the speed, we'll do something like 200, just so that's twice as fast. And then we'll pull this over so it's a bit darker right there. And then that looks pretty good in my opinion. And then we can go one step further, unsolo this. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pre-compose this displacement map. Because we have a time warp on it that's going faster, I also want to be able to put a matte on this. All right, so what we're going to do is now create a new solid, and we'll just call this matte. Drag that above the displacement map here, turn it off, grab a rectangle tool, and then we're just going to create a little rectangle like that. Then the displacement map can be set to alpha. And this is going to look a little bit weird at first, but if we click F, you can feather this out a little bit more subtle like that. Then we're going to attach that to the zoom null object, open up the mask controls, keyframe the mask path, and then we'll go forward to something like 25. I'm going to select this, then click Control T, and then hold down Control, and we're just going to pull this out, and then we can pull this up. So basically we just have something that's radiating outwards, which looks fine. If it's a little bit too sharp, you can always go ahead and add something like a roughen edges if you really want to break that up a bit more. But we want to turn down the edge sharpness quite a bit, and then the scale you could just play around with the scale with the evolution or something. Just add just a little bit more roughness to that. And actually one other thing that we could do here, go up to our effects and presets, grab a turbulent displace texture, and then we could just play around with that and we'll get a little bit more wavy lines. Okay, so let's go back to this matte object, click M, select mask 1, and then click Control D to duplicate. And then on the second mask, what we're going to do is change it to subtract. So essentially what we did is just kind of cancel everything out. So if we solo just this displacement map, now the whole thing is pretty much gone except for something around the edges. But what we want to do here is just kind of move these keyframes over so we get something that kind of radiates out like this. And then for this center one, I'm just going to select these, and then on the first keyframe, scale these down so they kind of disappear, and then we get something like that. All right, so then we're going to take the displacement map and the matte, I'm going to pre-compose these, and then we're just going to call this particle matte. And then particle matte can be turned off. This background here, we'll just call this particles. And then on the particles layer, we're going to change the track matte to Luma. So then what we're going to get is something like this. I just want to refine this matte just a little bit more, but I do want to see the end result. So we can lock the comp, double click our particle matte, drag this over and dock it on this side. And then we can go back to our matte, click F for feathering. And I think I'm going to make this feathered quite a bit more. We'll do something like 500 and 500. Then on mask 2, click U so we can see our keyframes. I think actually I will make this just a little bit bigger again, just so we kind of get rid of everything just a little bit faster. So I just spent a few more minutes refining that matte. It's kind of flashing through really fast here. I didn't want to cut anything, so I just wanted to show everything I'm doing, but this part was a little bit long-winded. I'm just tweaking some of the keyframes, trying to get the timing right, and eventually I got it. Something that I was happy with, something where the particles kind of came out from the center in the way that I wanted. So just play around with it and you can get something that's similar. Something more like this. Just wanted to get the timing right on that. Okay, let's close that. And I think we still could do with just one more component for the background. Let's go back up to our pack manager here and then see what else that we could add to this. So I quite like background 21. Let's load that in. And there's also some other cool elements here, such as this kind of glitch, which I think would look pretty cool at the end. I'm going to double click that one too. And then we're going to close that. So for the glitch, we can just turn that off for now. And then for this background, we'll pull this all the way down here. We could go ahead and do the same treatment by going into this composition and resizing everything. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to scale this up because this is going to be in the background and it actually scales pretty well. It's not really the main focus and because I'm lazy. Okay, so let's go into that layer though. And there's a few layers here that I don't think that we're going to need. So if we unshy this, you can see this is a pretty complicated layer. As we go forward, there's some text that's going to show up right where our logo is. So if we go through and just make sure you disable some of these things, these coding text layers, I think that would look a bit better. And then we don't need the backgrounds. And then we can go back to our main comp. Kind of like how that's framed there. And then we can also attach this to that null object, collapse the transforms, make it 3D, attach it to zoom, and then that will move with it as well. So we're going to select the background and then I'm going to move this over just a little bit. So I want the text to kind of hit the ground and then have the little particles fly out and then we get the loading thing start. Something more like that. I'm also going to just pull this text up just a little bit. I can go back into my text layer for this. Then I can just go to this scale text, pull that up just a little bit. All right, so I think this is looking pretty good, but I want to see if we could add just one more level of distortion and kind of fade it out that way. Let's go back one last time into the pack manager. We're just going to scroll down here to the bottom, and then we're going to use something like a glitch map, something like this. Now for this, I don't want to scale this up because I want to have that kind of fine detail. I'm going to go inside the comp, resize this manually to 4K, and then just go through each one of these and just make sure these are 4K too, as we've been doing. And then make sure you do it for the composition as well. So now we have a lot of that fine detail. And what we can do at this point is add in a new adjustment layer. Call this distortion end, and then we can grab a displacement map effect. The displacement map layer would be glitch map 3. You can do effects and masks in case you want to add like a curves or something to it. We can change this to be luminance for the horizontal and vertical displacement. We'll pull this over so it starts towards the end here, and then we can increase the amount. Get a lot of distortion here, so then we can just turn this off, and then we can kind of end it at around this point. And then I want it to get to about here. All right, so I think that looks kind of cool. Kind of just end this animation there. And then with this other glitch that we got earlier, we can pull this on top, turn this layer on. And for this one, we'll just go into this comp, resize just the comp to 4K, but the layers are actually much longer, so it's fine. We don't need to worry about that. And then we'll go ahead and add a solid to act as a background. Pull that underneath everything. Back to our main comp, and then drag this over. And right after the distortion hits here, we can add some like bigger distortion, kind of finish that off. Grab a time warp effect, crank that up, And with just a few extra tweaks, this is the final result that I came up with. This tutorial went on a little bit longer than I wanted. My tutorials always seem to be longer than I expect, but I wanted to really show how you can really adjust the comps with these templates to change pretty much whatever you want. So if there's something that you don't like, some aspect of it is pretty easy to change, as long as you understand how the layers are set up. And we're barely scratching the surface, especially with the full bundle. I was basically only looking at one of the templates, but their epic trailers is really cool, but all of their packs are pretty useful for motion graphics. Anyway, there's a link in the description if you'd like to check it out. And if you learned something, click that like button. Feel free to ask a question. I also have a Discord server now, so if you want to ask me a question there, you can post screenshots and have more of a dialogue. Otherwise, YouTube comments are always appreciated, and they really help out the channel. Alright guys, see you next time. Peace.